Hello friends. Recently, a submersible named Titan, which takes people to view the remnants of the ship Titanic, which sank in the year 1912, imploded, leading to the death of all the 5 occupants. What is this ship of which people go to see the remnants even after 1 century? The RMS Titanic, a luxury steamship, sank in the early hours of April 15, 1912 off the coast of Newfoundland in the North Atlantic after sideswiping an iceberg during its maiden voyage. What led to this accident? How the unsinkable Titanic could sink? Was the captain at fault, and what was the aftermath of the Titanic catastrophe? Let's find answers to these questions in this video. Before moving ahead, please subscribe to the Upfront and press the bell icon to get notification of all our updates. I'm Nihal Muhammad and you're watching the Upfront. The Titanic was the product of intense competition among rival shipping lines in the first half of the 20th century. On May 31, 1911, Titanic's immense hull, the largest movable man-made object in the world at the time, made its way down the slipways and into the River Lagan in Belfast. More than 1 lakh people attended the launching, which took just over a minute and went off without a hitch. The hull was immediately towed to a mammoth fitting-out dock where thousands of workers would spend most of the next year building the ship's decks, constructing her lavish interiors, and installing the 29 giant boilers that would power her 2 main steam engines. Titanic's departure from Southampton on April 10th was a much-awaited moment. According to a theory put forth by a small number of Titanic experts, a small fire which was discovered in one of the bunkers of the ship even before departure became uncontrollable after the ship left Southampton, forcing the crew to attempt a full-speed crossing. Moving at such a fast pace, they were unable to avoid the fatal collision with the iceberg. Another unsettling event took place when Titanic left the Southampton dock. As she got underway, she narrowly escaped a collision with America's Line's SS New York. Superstitious Titanic buffs sometimes point to this as the worst kind of omen for a ship departing on her maiden voyage. On April 14th, after 4 days of uneventful sailing, Titanic received sporadic reports of ice from other ships, but she was sailing on calm seas under a moonless clear sky. At about 11:30 p.m., a lookout saw an iceberg coming out of a slight haze dead ahead, then rang the warning bell and telephoned the bridge. The engines were quickly reversed and the ship was turned sharply instead of making a direct impact. Titanic seemed to graze along the side of the berg, sprinkling ice fragments on the forward deck. Sensing no collision, the lookouts were relieved. They had no idea that the iceberg had a jagged underwater spur which splashed a 300-foot gash in the hull below the ship's waterline. By the time the captain toured the damaged area with Harland and Wolff's Thomas Andrews, 5 compartments were already filling with seawater and the bow of the doomed ship was alarmingly pitched downward, allowing seawater to pour from one bulkhead into the neighboring compartment. Andrews did a quick calculation and estimated that Titanic might remain afloat for an hour and a half, perhaps slightly more. At that point, the captain, who had already instructed his wireless operator to call for help, ordered the lifeboats to be loaded. A little more than an hour after the contact with the iceberg, a largely disorganized and haphazard evacuation began with the lowering of the first lifeboat. The craft was designed to hold 65 people. It left with only 28 aboard. Tragically, this was to be the norm. During the confusion and chaos during the precious hours before Titanic plunged into the sea, nearly every lifeboat would be launched woefully underfilled, some with only a handful of passengers. In compliance with the law of the sea, women and children boarded the boats first. Only when there were no women or children nearby were men permitted to board. Yet many of the victims were in fact women and children. the result of disorderly procedures that failed to get them to the boats in the first place. Exceeding Andrew's prediction, Titanic stubbornly stayed afloat for close to 3 hours. Those hours witnessed acts of craven cowardice and extraordinary bravery. Hundreds of human dramas unfolded between the order to load the lifeboats and the ship's final plunge. Men saw wives and children. Families were separated in the confusion, and selfless individuals gave up their spots to remain with loved ones or allow a more vulnerable passenger to escape. In the end, 706 people survived the sinking of the Titanic. Titanic, nearly perpendicular and with many of her lights still aglow, finally dove beneath the ocean's surface at about 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912. Throughout the morning, Canada's Carpathia, after receiving Titanic's distress call at midnight and steaming at full speed while dodging ice floes all night, rounded up all of the lifeboats. They contained only 705 survivors. Titanic's creators believed they had built an unsinkable ship that could not be defeated by the laws of the nature. This same overconfidence explains the electrifying impact Titanic's sinking had on the public when she was lost. There was widespread disbelief that the ship could not possibly have sunk, and due to the era's slow and unreliable means of communication, misinformation abounded. Newspapers initially reported that the ship had collided with an iceberg but remained afloat and was being towed to port with everyone on board. It took many hours for accurate accounts to become widely available, and even then, people had trouble accepting that this paragon of modern technology could sink on her maiden voyage, taking more than 1,500 souls with her. What made the unsinkable Titanic sink? According to some hypotheses, Titanic was doomed from the start by a design that many lauded as the state of the art. The Olympic-class ships featured a double bottom and 15 watertight bulkhead compartments equipped with electric watertight doors that could be operated individually or simultaneously by a switch on the bridge. It was these watertight bulkheads that inspired Shipbuilder magazine in a special issue devoted to the Olympic liners to deem them practically unsinkable. But the watertight compartment design contained a flaw that was a critical factor in Titanic's sinking. While the individual bulkheads were indeed watertight, the walls separating the bulkheads extended only a few feet above the waterline, so water could pour from one compartment into another, especially if the ship began to list or pitch forward. The second critical safety lapse that contributed to the loss of so many lives was the inadequate number of lifeboats carried on Titanic. A mere 16 boats plus 4 Engelhardt collapsibles could accommodate just 1,178 people. Titanic could carry up to 2,435 passengers, and a crew of approximately 900 brought her capacity to more than 3,300 people. As a result, even if the lifeboats were loaded to full capacity during an emergency evacuation, there were available seats for only 1/3 of those on board. While unthinkably inadequate by today's standards, Titanic's supply of lifeboats actually exceeded the British Board of Trade's requirements. That's it for today. If you like the content we provide, please subscribe to the Upfront and press the bell icon to get notification of all our updates. Please share our videos and educate others. Thank you.